The western horizon blazed crimson as the sun sank behind the jagged peaks of the Black Mesa Mountains. September 1872. The wagon train bound for California's Sacramento Valley had stopped early to make camp along the shallow banks of Whitewater. Greek. 10 families, 26 souls in all, had joined together 3 months earlier in St. Louis with dreams of orchards, farmland, and new beginnings. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 12-year-old Samuel Cooper sat with his 8-year-old sister, Emily, at the creek's edge, their bare feet dangling in the cool water. He skipped stones across the surface while Emily collected colorful pebbles for the small pouch she'd been filling throughout their journey west. "You think Pa will let me have my own peach tree when we get there?" Emily asked, her auburn hair gleaming in the fading light as she examined a smooth green stone. "Course he will," Samuel replied, searching for another flat rock. "He promised, didn't he? Said you could plant it right outside your window." From their perch by the creek, they could see the entire camp, wagons arranged in a protective circle, campfires beginning to flicker to life, the comforting sounds of cookware and conversation filling the air. Their father, William Cooper, a blacksmith from Missouri with calloused hands and kind eyes, helped Mr. Jackson repair a broken wagon wheel. Their mother, Sarah, stirred a pot of beans and bacon, occasionally glancing toward the creek to check on her children. "Sam, Emily, supper in 10 minutes, she called, waving a wooden spoon. Samuel waved back. "Race you to that big tree and back. Before supper," he challenged his sister, pointing to a gnarled oak 50 yards downstream. Emily grinned, already scrambling to her feet. "You're gonna lose this time." The children darted along the creek bank, their laughter carrying across the water. Neither noticed the still silence that had fallen over the distant hillside, where moments earlier birds had been singing their evening songs. They reached the old oak, both slapping its rough trunk at nearly the same moment. "I won," Emily declared. "Did not?" Samuel countered, though he couldn't keep from smiling at his sister's delight. Then came the sound, a single rifle shot that echoed across the valley, followed immediately by a cacophony of gunfire and screams that froze the children. "In place. Pa," Emily whispered, her eyes widening with fear. Samuel grabbed his sister's arm, instinctively pulling her behind the oak's massive trunk. From their position, partially hidden by the tree and the creek's slight bend, they could see riders pouring into the camp from the north ridge, at least 15 men on horseback, faces concealed by bandanas, rifles and revolvers blazing as they circled the wagons. "Raiders," Samuel breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. The scene before them transformed into a nightmare with terrifying speed. The wagon master fell first, then Mr. Jackson. Women screamed as they tried to shield their children. Samuel saw his father emerge from behind a wagon with his hunting rifle, managing to fire once before 3 riders converged on him. "We have to help them," Emily cried, trying to pull away from her brother's grip. "We can't," Samuel hissed, clamping his hand over her mouth and dragging her down the creek bank into the shallow water. "We can't help them, Em. We have to hide." The gunfire continued, punctuated by shouts, screams, and the crash of splintering wood as the raiders tore through the wagons. With his arm locked around his sister's waist, Samuel waded backward down the creek, keeping low beneath the overhanging bank, moving away from camp with each step. "My pebbles," Emily whimpered, reaching for the small pouch that had fallen from her pocket. "Leave them," Samuel ordered, his voice breaking. "We have to be quiet, like when Pa took us hunting, remember? Absolutely silent." They continued their painstaking retreat, the cold water numbing their feet and legs as they moved deeper into the shadows. The creek bent sharply 100 yards downstream, cutting through a stand of thick willows and cottonwoods. Here the bank rose nearly 4 feet, creating a natural hollow beneath gnarled roots where spring floods had carved away the soil. "In here," Samuel whispered, guiding Emily into the shadowy recess. The space was barely large enough for both of them, forcing them to huddle together, shivering in their wet clothes as darkness fell completely around them. The sounds from the camp continued, no longer screams and gunfire, but the methodical noises of plunder. Occasional laughter carried across the water, punctuated by the crash of crates being broken open and the distinctive crack of bottles. Emily buried her face against Samuel's shoulder, her small body trembling with silent sobs. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, the other pressed against his own mouth to keep from making a sound. His mind replayed the image of his father falling, his mother's panicked face as she looked toward the creek, perhaps her final thought being of her children. Hours passed. The raiders built a bonfire in the center of the destroyed camp, their shadowy figures moving back and forth across the distant flames as they drank and celebrated their plunder. Samuel and Emily remained frozen in their hiding place, afraid, even to whisper. When the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, the raiders finally mounted their horses and rode away, heading west along the main trail. Still the children didn't move, remembering stories of ambushes and tricks from the wagon master's evening tales. The sun had cleared the horizon when Samuel finally eased out from their hiding place, his limbs stiff and aching from cold and immobility. "Stay here," he told Emily, whose face was streaked with dried tears and dirt. "I'm going to look." "Don't leave me," she pleaded, clutching his arm. "Just for a minute. I need to see if—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I need to see." Emily nodded reluctantly, pressing herself back against the earthen wall of their shelter. Samuel crept along the creek bank, staying low and using the morning mist that hovered over the water as cover. As he approached the camp, the smell reached him first: gunpowder, smoke, and something heavier, metallic. The destruction came into focus through the thinning fog. Wagons overturned or broken apart, supplies scattered across the ground, and bodies, so many bodies lying where they had fallen. He spotted his father near one of the broken wheels, his mother just a few yards away, her hand outstretched as if reaching for him in her final moments. Samuel's legs gave way, and he sank to his knees in the damp grass, a silent scream locked in his throat. After several minutes, survival instinct reasserted itself. He couldn't stay here. Emily couldn't see this. They needed to move, to find help or shelter before the raiders returned or wild animals were drawn to the site. With enormous effort, he forced himself to stand and scan the area for anything useful. The raiders had been thorough, taking all weapons, ammunition, food, and valuables. But in their haste, they had overlooked some things. A water canteen trampled into the mud, a small sack of cornmeal that had fallen beneath a wagon seat, a torn blanket caught on a broken wheel spoke. Samuel gathered these items mechanically, unable to look at the bodies of his parents and friends as he moved through the wreckage. A child's rag doll, miraculously untouched amid the chaos, caught his eye. He picked it up, knowing Emily would want this small comfort. He was reaching for a dented cooking pot when he heard the sound. A horse approaching from the east, moving at a steady walk. Terror surged through him. Had one of the raiders returned? Samuel drove beneath the nearest wagon, clutching his meager findings to his chest as he peered out at the trail. A single rider came into view, silhouetted against the morning sun. The man rode tall in the saddle, his posture alert but relaxed, different from the predatory stance of the raiders. More telling was his approach, direct, unhurried, making no attempt to conceal his presence. As the rider drew closer, Samuel could make out his appearance, a man with copper skin and black hair pulled back with a leather cord. He wore buckskin leggings and a blue military-style shirt with what appeared to be a partial uniform jacket. A rifle rested across his saddle, but it remained holstered as he surveyed the massacre site. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, his moccasined feet making almost no sound as he moved among the bodies. His manner was respectful, almost ceremonial, as he knelt beside each victim, studying faces and positions with careful attention. Samuel remained hidden, torn between fear of discovery and desperate hope that this man might help. The stranger worked methodically around the camp, examining wagon tracks and occasionally touching the earth, reading signs invisible to untrained eyes. When he approached the bodies of Samuel's parents, the boy had to bite his lip to keep from crying out. The man knelt between them, saying something in a language Samuel didn't recognize, then gently closed their staring eyes. After completing his examination of the camp, the stranger stood in the center of the destruction, his gaze sweeping the perimeter. His eyes paused on the creek, following its course to the bend where Samuel had left Emily. With deliberate steps, he began walking in that direction. Samuel's heart raced. Emily was alone, unprotected. In a split-second decision, he scrambled. From beneath the wagon, snatched up a broken wagon axle, and stepped into the stranger's path. "Stay back!" he shouted, holding the makeshift weapon with trembling hands. "I'll hurt you if I have to." The man stopped, hands raised slightly in a calming gesture. "I mean no harm," he said in perfect, if slightly accented, English. "I am Nathan. 2 Hawks, scout for the United States Army at Fort Windham." Samuel kept the axle raised. "How do I know you're not with them, the men who did this?" "The Carson gang," 2 Hawks replied. "I have been tracking them for 2 weeks. They are moving west now, toward the Black Mesa." He studied Samuel with keen eyes that missed nothing. "You survived. Are there others?" Samuel hesitated, unwilling to reveal Emily's existence until he was certain this man could be trusted. 2 Hawks seemed to read his thoughts. Slowly, deliberately, he removed his jacket and turned in a complete circle. No hidden weapons, no stolen goods. He gestured to the badge pinned to his shirt. "I'm here to help, if I can." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "My sister," Samuel finally admitted. "She's 8. We were by the creek when it happened. We hid all night." 2 Hawks nodded, his expression solemn but not surprised. "Where is she now?" "Downstream, in a hiding place." "Then we should go to her. This place is not safe to remain." Samuel lowered the axle slightly. "Our parents are here, everyone we knew." "Yes," 2 Hawks acknowledged, his voice gentling. "And soon the wolves and vultures will come. Your sister needs you now. The living must be our concern." The simple truth of these words penetrated Samuel's shock. He looked from 2 Hawks to the bodies scattered across the blood-soaked earth, then back to the scout's steady gaze. "Can I say goodbye to them first?" 2 Hawks nodded. "I will wait here." Samuel approached his parents' bodies, his legs nearly buckling with each step. He knelt between them as 2 Hawks had done earlier, and touched their cold hands one last time. "I'll take care of Emily," he whispered. "I promise." With trembling fingers, he removed his father's pocket watch and his mother's silver locket, threading them onto the leather cord he wore around his neck. Then he took a deep breath and returned to where 2 Hawks waited. "I'm ready," he said, though he felt anything but ready for whatever lay ahead. "Lead the way to your sister," 2 Hawks instructed. "We must move quickly." They followed the creek back to where Emily remained hidden in the root hollow. When she saw Samuel approaching, with a stranger, her eyes widened with fear, but there was nowhere for her to run. "It's okay, Em," Samuel called softly. "He's going to help us." Emily emerged cautiously, her dress mud-stained and torn, her face pale with shock and fear. When Samuel handed her the rag doll retrieved from camp, She clutched it to her chest, tears streaming down her face anew. "Little sparrow," Two Hawks said, his voice gentle as he crouched to meet her at eye level. "You were very brave to stay hidden." Emily studied him with solemn eyes. "Are Mama and Papa really gone?" Samuel's throat tightened as he put his arm around his sister's thin shoulders. "Yes, Em, they're gone." Two Hawks allowed them this moment of shared grief before speaking again. "We cannot stay here. The gang may return if they realize we're survivors, and there are other dangers in this land." "Where would we go?" Samuel asked. "The nearest settlement is at least a week's journey. We can't make it alone." "Not alone," Two Hawks confirmed. "My people's summer camp is 3 days' ride from here, in the valley beyond Shadow Canyon. There you can rest and regain your strength, while I report to the fort." Samuel exchanged a glance with Emily, reading the exhaustion and fear in her face. They had no realistic alternative. 2 children alone in territory controlled by both hostile raiders, and the elements would not survive long. "Your people, will they accept us?" Samuel asked hesitantly. Something flickered across Two Hawks' face. Pain, perhaps, or memory. "My wife, Morning Flower, will welcome children in need. She lost our son to fever 2 winters ago. The others will follow her lead." This glimpse of personal tragedy, offered without elaboration, did more to earn Samuel's trust than any badge or uniform could have. He nodded slowly. "We'll go with you." Two Hawks helped gather the few supplies Samuel had salvaged, adding items from his own saddlebags: jerky, a water skin, and a small blanket that he wrapped around Emily's shoulders. He lifted the children onto his horse, positioning Emily in front of Samuel. "We must travel quickly today," he explained, as he took the reins and began leading them away from the creek. "The army patrol will follow my trail within a day. There would be complications if they found you with me." Samuel didn't fully understand this statement, but the urgency in the scout's voice was clear. As they moved deeper into the forest, following game trails that wound into the foothills, Samuel cast one final glance back toward the massacre site. The morning sun now illuminated the full extent of the destruction, the broken wagons casting long shadows across the ground, where dreams of California orchards had died in a hail of gunfire. "The patrol," Samuel said suddenly, remembering Two Hawks' words. "Will they bury everyone properly?" "They will," Two Hawks assured him. "The dead will be honored, but we must focus on keeping you safe now." As they traveled through the morning, hours, the full impact of what had happened and what lay ahead began to settle on Samuel's shoulders. His entire world had been uprooted in a single night of violence. Now he and Emily were traveling into unknown wilderness with a man they had just met, from a culture they had been taught to fear, toward a future he couldn't begin to imagine. Yet when he felt Emily lean back against him, her small body gradually relaxing as exhaustion overcame fear, Samuel felt a fierce resolve hardening within him. They had not survived by chance only to succumb to wilderness hazards or grief. Whatever lay ahead, however strange or difficult, he would face it with the same determination that had kept them alive through that terrible night. The horse picked its way carefully along the rocky trail, climbing steadily into higher elevations, where pine forests provided welcome cover from the open plains below. Around midday, they stopped beside a small spring to rest and allow the children to drink. Two Hawks moved a respectful distance away, keeping watch from a rocky outcropping that offered a view of the terrain they had traversed. Samuel helped Emily wash her face and hands in the cool water, noticing for the first time the scratches on her arms from their frantic flight down the creek bank. "Does it hurt?" he asked, gently examining a deeper cut on her palm. Emily shook her head, though her brave face couldn't quite hide her discomfort. "Sam, are we going to be okay?" Samuel looked up at his sister's face, so trusting despite everything she had witnessed. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. At 12 years old, he had become her protector, her family, her entire world. "Yes," he said with a conviction he didn't entirely feel. "We're going to be okay, Em, I promise." By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered over the mountains, threatening rain. The temperature dropped as Nathan Two Hawks led them higher into pine-covered ridges. Emily had fallen asleep against Samuel's chest, the emotional and physical exhaustion finally claiming her. Samuel himself fought to stay alert, his body swaying slightly with each step of the horse. "We will rest soon," Two Hawks said, noticing the boy's fatigue. "There is a sheltered place, half a day's journey ahead, where we can safely spend the night." Samuel nodded, blinking hard to clear his vision. "Your people, how far are they?" 2 more days beyond tomorrow's camp. They have moved higher into the mountains for the late summer hunt. Two Hawks paused, studying the darkening sky. "The storm will pass quickly, but we must find shelter before it breaks." As if summoned by his words, the first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering against the pine needles overhead. Two Hawks quickened their pace, leading the horse along a barely visible trail that wound between massive boulders and towering pines. The rain intensified, soaking through Samuel's shirt, despite the partial protection of the trees. Emily stirred in his arms, whimpering as the cold water struck her face. "Not much farther," Two Hawks assured them, as thunder rumbled across the mountains. Just as the downpour reached its peak, Two Hawks guided them into a narrow ravine sheltered by overhanging rock. At its deepest point, the natural formation created a shallow cave, its entrance partially concealed by scrub brush and stunted juniper. "My father showed me this place when I was younger than you," Two Hawks explained as he helped the children dismount. "It has sheltered Comanche hunters for generations." The shelter proved surprisingly dry, with a small ring of blackened stones marking a previous fire pit. Two Hawks worked quickly, gathering dry kindling from the protected recesses of the cave and building a small fire that cast dancing shadows against the rock walls. Samuel helped Emily out of her wet clothes, wrapping her in the blanket. Two Hawks had provided earlier. The scout produced strips of dried meat from his saddlebag, offering portions to both children. "Eat," he instructed. "This will restore your strength." As they huddled near the small fire, the storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the ravine in brief, brilliant flashes. Emily pressed close to Samuel's side, flinching with each thunderclap. "The storm speaks," Two Hawks said, noticing her fear. "My people believe thunder is the voice of powerful spirits riding across the sky." "What are they saying?" Emily asked, tentatively, her first words since leaving the creek. Two Hawks considered this, his weathered face softening slightly. "Tonight they speak of change, of endings and beginnings." Fearsome descriptions of savages he'd heard from settlers and traders throughout their journey west. Nathan Two Hawks spoke perfect English, moved with educated confidence, yet clearly belonged to a world entirely different from the one Samuel had known. "Why do you scout for the army?" Samuel asked suddenly. "I thought the Comanche were enemies of the white man?" Two Hawks finished when the boy hesitated. "Many are, with good reason." He added a small branch to the fire, watching the flames leap higher. "But the old conflicts bring only more death. I chose a different path." "Like tracking the Carson gang," Two Hawks nodded. "They attack both settlers and native peoples. They steal, they kill, they have no honor." His gaze grew distant. 4 months ago, they raided a Comanche hunting party. 6 men died, including my brother. Samuel absorbed this in silence, understanding for the first time that their fates had intersected through shared tragedy. "Will the army catch them?" he asked finally. "Perhaps, if they follow my tracking. But the Carson gang has powerful friends." Two Hawks' expressions hardened. Some say certain officials protect them in exchange for a share of their plunder. This revelation sent a chill through Samuel that had nothing to do with his damp clothes. Is that why you mentioned complications? If the patrol found us with you? Two Hawks turned to face him fully, his expression grave in the firelight. The massacre of your wagon train raises questions. Why this particular group? Why were all witnesses eliminated? If certain influential men are involved, survivors could be inconvenient. You think we're still in danger? Samuel instinctively pulled Emily closer, though she had drifted to sleep once more. I think caution is wise, Two Hawks replied, at least until we know more. As the storm gradually moved eastward, the thunder fading to distant rumbles, Samuel helped Two Hawks arrange pine boughs into sleeping pallets near the fire. Despite his bone-deep exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Each time he closed his eyes, vivid images of the massacre flooded his mind. His father falling, his mother's outstretched hand, the terrified faces of families they had traveled with for months. You should try to rest, Two Hawks said softly, from his position near the cave entrance. Tomorrow's journey will be difficult. I can't stop seeing it, Samuel admitted, his voice barely audible over the dying fire. Every time I close my eyes, Two Hawks were silent for a long moment. When my wife and I lost our son to the fever, I walked for many days without sleep. The Comanche believe dreams are sacred pathways between worlds, but sometimes these pathways become filled with shadows. How did you find peace? Two Hawks studied the glowing embers. My people have ceremonies to clear troubled dreams, but in truth, peace came only when I found purpose again. What purpose? Protecting others from suffering the same fate. The scout's profile was silhouetted against the cave entrance, where stars had begun to appear as the clouds dispersed. That is why I scout for the army. Though many of my people disapprove, I can sometimes prevent bloodshed on both sides. Samuel considered this as he absently adjusted the blanket around Emily's shoulders. The idea that purpose might eventually overcome grief offered a fragile hope he hadn't dared consider since watching his world collapse just hours earlier. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, dragging him into fitful sleep punctuated by dreams where he ran endlessly through darkened forests, Emily's hand clutched in his, faceless riders always just behind them. Dawn arrived, with mist rising from the rain-soaked earth. Samuel woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting the catastrophic events that had led him to this strange shelter. Then reality crashed back, bringing with it a fresh wave of grief so intense it physically hurt to breathe. Emily was already awake, sitting cross-legged near Two Hawks as he prepared a simple breakfast of dried berries and what appeared to be flatbread from his provisions. She looked impossibly small in the borrowed blanket, her auburn hair tangled around her pale face, yet there was a quiet resilience in her posture that made Samuel's chest tighten with both pride and sorrow. At 8 years old, Emily Cooper had witnessed horrors no child should endure, yet here she sat, accepting food from Two Hawks and listening with apparent interest as he explained something about the planets visible beyond the cave entrance. The rain cleared the air, Two Hawks informed Samuel as he joined them. We can make good progress today if we start soon. Their second day of travel proved less physically demanding than the first, the rain having softened the earth and tamped down the dust that had coated every surface before the storm. Two Hawks allowed them longer rest periods, recognizing that Emily's smaller body and Samuel's ongoing shock required consideration. During these breaks, he pointed out edible plants, medicinal herbs, and signs of game animals, practical knowledge that might serve them well. "Look there," Two Hawks said during one such rest, indicating a barely visible impression in the mud near a small stream where they had stopped to drink. Deer passed here just after the rain stopped, a female with 2 young ones. Emily knelt to examine the tracks with fascination. "How can you tell she has babies?" Two hawks pointed to the spacing and depth of the prints. See how these smaller tracks follow closely, and how do they wander here to taste these sweet leaves, then return to their mother's path? Young ones always reveal themselves through curiosity. Samuel watched his sister absorb this information with eager attention, grateful for these momentary distractions from their loss and uncertain future. Emily had always been naturally inquisitive, peppering their father with endless questions about his blacksmith work. That same curiosity now seemed to be helping her cope with their drastically altered circumstances. By midday, they had reached a high ridge that offered a sweeping view of the territory they had traversed. Far below, Samuel could make out the meandering line of Whitewater Creek, and in the hazy distance, what might have been the remains of the wagon train, now just a dark smudge on the vast landscape. "Look there," Two Hawks said, pointing to a barely visible dust cloud moving along the main trail. "The Army patrol returns to Fort Windham. Without searching for survivors?" Samuel asked, surprised. "They likely found signs that the Carson gang headed west. That would be their priority." Two Hawks' expressions revealed nothing, but something in his voice suggested he was withholding information. "There's more, isn't there?" Samuel pressed. Two Hawks hesitated before responding. "Before leaving Fort Windham, I heard rumors that the wagon train carried something valuable, more than the usual settler possessions." Samuel frowned, trying to reconcile this information with what he knew of their traveling companions. "Mr. Blackwell had a larger wagon with a locked compartment. He said he was a government surveyor. Did the raiders spend more time with his wagon?" Samuel thought back to the chaos he had witnessed from their hiding place. "Yes, I heard them cursing when they couldn't open something." This seemed to confirm Two Hawks' suspicions. If the Carson gang intercepted a government shipment, the Army would focus on recovery rather than searching for survivors they believe don't exist. The implications settled heavily on Samuel. Their wagon train might have been targeted specifically because of a secret cargo none of them had known about. They continued their journey through the afternoon, the trail leading them higher into pine-covered slopes. Emily rode in front of Two Hawks now, allowing Samuel to walk alongside the horse to stretch his legs. The scout pointed out landmarks, teaching them to recognize the territory in ways that went beyond simple direction finding. "The mountains have names beyond what appears on white men's maps," Two Hawks explained. "That peak rising to the north, my people call it Sleeping Bear, for the way its outline resembles a great bear at rest." "Do all things have different names?" Emily asked, her voice stronger than it had been since the massacre. "Most important things," Two Hawks confirmed. "Places, plants, animals, the names given by those who have lived with them longest, often reveal their true nature." "What do the Comanche call children like us?" Samuel asked suddenly. "Children with no family?" Two Hawks considered this carefully before answering. "Our word would translate to those who walk between worlds. It is not seen as a state of lack, but rather of possibility." "Possibility," Samuel repeated skeptically. "Those who lose their original place in the world are free to create a new one," Two Hawks explained. "This is both a great burden and a great gift." As evening approached, Two Hawks led them into a sheltered valley nestled between three peaks. A small, clear lake reflected the surrounding pines, and alongside it, Samuel saw the first signs of human habitation. A cluster of conical structures he recognized as teepees, with smoke rising from several central openings. "My people," Two Hawks said simply, halting on a rise overlooking the encampment. Samuel counted approximately 20 teepees arranged in a rough circle around a central area. People moved about on various tasks, women carrying water or working. With hides, men attending to horses in a nearby meadow, children playing games with sticks and a small ball. The sight of normal, peaceful activity after the violence they had witnessed created a strange disconnection in Samuel's mind. "They will have posted sentries," Two Hawks continued. "We have been observed since entering the valley. As if confirming his words, two mounted figures appeared from the tree line to their right, approaching cautiously with bows at the ready. When they recognized two hawks, their posture relaxed slightly, though their curious gazes fixed immediately on Samuel and Emily. A rapid exchange in Comanche followed, too quick for Samuel to discern individual words. One of the riders, a young man with a single eagle feather in his hair, cast a particularly suspicious glance toward the children before turning his horse and galloping toward the camp, presumably to announce their arrival. "Black Hawk is concerned by your presence," Two Hawks explained as they began moving toward the encampment. "He lost his father to white settlers' bullets last year." "Maybe this isn't wise," Samuel said, doubt creeping into his voice. "We don't want to bring trouble to your people." "The decision is not Black Hawk's alone to make," Two Hawks replied, his tone carrying quiet authority. "Chief Running Fox will hear my reasons, and the council will decide." As they approached the camp, activity slowed, then stopped entirely, all eyes turning to observe the unexpected visitors. Samuel felt exposed under their collective gaze, acutely aware of his tattered clothing, his disheveled appearance, and most of all, his obvious difference from everyone around him. A small delegation emerged from the largest teepee to meet them. An elderly man whose bearing suggested leadership, flanked by two younger men, and a woman whose dignified presence commanded immediate respect. Two Hawks dismounted and helped the children down, keeping a supportive hand at Emily's shoulder as he led them forward to meet the delegation. Speaking in Comanche, he addressed the elderly man with evident respect, occasionally gesturing towards Samuel and Emily. After what seemed an interminable explanation, the older man, Running Fox, Samuel presumed, stepped forward to study them more closely. His deeply lined face revealed little emotion, but his eyes held a keen intelligence that seemed to assess not just their appearance, but their character. "My scout brings strangers to our hidden place," he said in halting but clear English. "This requires explanation beyond what he has given." Before Samuel could respond, Emily stepped forward, her small face tilted up to meet the chief's gaze. "Bad men killed our mama and papa," she said simply. "And all our friends. Mr. Two Hawks saved us." The direct honesty of a child, delivered without fear or guile, seemed to register with Running Fox. His stern expression softened almost imperceptibly as he looked from Emily to Samuel. "The children are hungry and tired from their journey," said the woman standing beside Running Fox, also speaking in English, though more fluently than the chief. "Let us continue this discussion after they have been given food and rest." She stepped forward, addressing Samuel directly. "I am Morning Flower, wife to Nathan Two Hawks. Come to my lodge first. Then the council will speak with you." Samuel looked to Two Hawks, who nodded in encouragement. With no real alternative, he took Emily's hand and followed Morning Flower toward a teepee decorated with painted symbols he didn't recognize. Behind them, the intense discussion between Two Hawks and the tribal leaders continued, punctuated by what sounded like heated objections from several younger men, including Black Hawk. Inside the teepee, Samuel found a space far more comfortable and organized than he had anticipated. A central fire provided warmth and light, with sleeping robes arranged around the perimeter. Colorful woven blankets and parfleche containers lined the walls, and bundles of dried herbs hung from the lodge poles. Morning Flower gestured for them to sit on a pile of soft furs near the fire, then busied herself preparing a tea of some sort. "You are safe here," she said as she worked, her movements graceful and economical. "For now, at least. My husband has great respect among our people, though many question his work with the army." She handed each of them a small wooden cup filled with a fragrant tea. "This will help restore your strength. Drink slowly." Samuel sipped cautiously, finding the tea bitter but not unpleasant. Emily, always more adaptable, drank hers without hesitation, then looked up at Morning Flower with tired eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "It tastes like the tea our mama made when we had colds." Something flickered across Morning Flower's face. Recognition of shared human experience transcending cultural differences. She reached out to brush a strand of hair from Emily's face, the gesture so maternal that Samuel saw his sister's eyes fill with tears for the first time since the morning after the massacre. "Your brother has protected you well," Morning Flower said gently. "Now others will help carry this burden." From outside came the sounds of continued discussion, occasionally rising in volume before subsiding again to measured tones. The fate of the Cooper children hung in the balance, debated by people whose language and customs were entirely foreign to them. Samuel met Morning Flower's gaze across the fire. "Will your people allow us to stay?" Her expression grew thoughtful. "It is unusual. Not all will welcome it." She glanced toward the teepee entrance, where the murmur of many voices suggested a larger gathering had formed. But Running Fox is wise. He knows that old ways must sometimes bend to meet new challenges. And if he decides against us, then we will find another path, Morning Flower stated simply, as if already including Samuel and Emily and her family group. "But first, you must be made presentable for the council. Your appearance now speaks of great suffering, which is true but not helpful for what comes next." With efficient movements, she began gathering various items: a bone comb, pots of what appeared to be rendered animal fat, mixed with herbs, clean buckskin clothing sized for younger tribal members. "You will wash at my private place by the stream," she instructed. "Then we will prepare you to meet the council." As she led them toward a small, sheltered bend in the stream that ran along the camp's perimeter, Samuel realized they stood at another threshold. Behind lay the world they had known, the wagon train, their parents, their planned future in California. Ahead stretched an unknown path among people who might either become their protectors or their latest disappointment in a world that had already taken everything from them. Autumn leaves drifted from cottonwood trees as Samuel completed his morning chores, carrying water from the stream to Morning Flower's lodge. 1 month had passed since the council's decision to grant the Cooper children temporary sanctuary with the Comanche. 1 month of learning, adapting, and grieving in equal measure. Chief Running Fox's ruling had not been made lightly. After hearing both Two Hawks' account of the massacre and Samuel's clear-eyed testimony, the council had deliberated through the night. Many voices had been raised in opposition, particularly from Black Hawk and his supporters, who viewed any white presence as a threat to their already precarious existence. Others had expressed practical concerns about limited winter provisions and the risk of drawing unwanted attention from authorities. In the end, what had swayed the council was not compassion alone, but strategy. Two Hawks had argued persuasively that the children's knowledge about the Carson gang could eventually help bring justice not only for the wagon train victims, but also for Comanche losses at the hands of the same outlaws. "Until the snow melts," from Eagle Peak had been Running Fox's pronouncement. "The children may shelter with Nathan Two Hawks and his wife. In return, they will learn our ways with respect. When spring comes, we will decide what paths open before them." Now, as Samuel approached Morning Flower's teepee with the morning water, he reflected on how completely their lives had transformed. The buckskin shirt and leggings he wore, crafted by Morning Flower herself, bore no resemblance to the store-bought clothes he'd worn from Missouri. His hands, once soft from town life, had toughened from daily tasks of gathering wood, tending horses, and helping prepare hides. Even his thoughts had begun to flow differently, absorbing the Comanche perspective of time as circular rather than linear, of wealth as something shared rather than hoarded. "Wabi," greeted Emily, emerging from the teepee with a small basket of cornmeal. At 8 years old, she had adapted to their new circumstances with surprising ease, her natural curiosity and openness serving her well. Already, she had picked up numerous Comanche words, charming even the most skeptical tribal members with her earnest attempts at their language. "Morning Flower says we're making journey bread today," she informed Samuel, using the term the Comanche, applied to traveling provisions, for when Nathan comes back. 2 Hawks had departed 5 days earlier on another scouting mission for Fort Windham, his expertise still valued by the army, despite the growing tensions between military authorities and Comanche leaders. His absence always created a subtle shift in the tribe's dynamics, with Black Hawk and other young warriors becoming more vocal in their opposition to the Cooper children's presence. "Has Nathan sent word?" Samuel asked, setting down the water buckets. Emily shook her head. "But Morning Flower says he will return with the half moon. That's tonight." Samuel nodded, masking his concern with a smile for his sister's benefit. 2 Hawks had been traveling for longer periods recently, his scouting routes taking him closer to settlements and forts where rumors about the Carson gang might be gathered. Each time he returned with darker news, increased military patrols, tensions with other tribes blamed for attacks they denied committing, and most worrying, continued sightings of the Carson gang operating with apparent immunity despite their known crimes. After completing their morning chores, Samuel and Emily joined Morning Flower at the drying racks where strips of buffalo meat were being prepared for winter storage. The fall hunt had been successful, providing essential provisions. For the coming months, when game would grow scarce and mobility limited by deep snow. "Your hands work differently," observed Yellowbird, an elderly woman who had initially regarded the children with suspicion but had gradually warmed to them. "But they find good ways sometimes." Coming from the reserved old woman, this qualified as high praise. Samuel acknowledged it with a respectful nod, aware of how hard-won such small acceptances had been. Many in the tribe still maintained distance, some out of cultural caution, others from deeper distrust. But a few, particularly the women and children, had begun to include them in their circles, recognizing the universal language of shared work and purpose. As they worked, Samuel found himself more attuned to the camp's rhythms and sounds than he would have been a month earlier. He noticed when the hunting party returned earlier than expected, their movement suggested urgency rather than triumph. He caught the subtle shift in conversations around him, a tension that spread like ripples in still water. When Little Fox, a boy slightly older than Samuel, appeared at the drying racks, his expression uncharacteristically solemn, Samuel knew something had happened. 2 Hawks returns," Little Fox announced without preamble. "The lookouts have spotted him on the eastern approach." "Already?" Samuel asked, exchanging a glance with Morning Flower. "He wasn't expected until nightfall." "He does not ride alone," Little Fox added. "The watchers say he brings others, men in soldier clothes." The news spread quickly through the camp. Army soldiers approaching the hidden valley was unprecedented and potentially threatening. By the time Samuel helped gather Emily and returned to Morning Flower's teepee, speculation had reached fever pitch. Some feared an attack or forced relocation order. Others suggested the soldiers might be pursuing the Carson gang and seeking Comanche tracking assistance. "It makes no sense for Nathan to bring danger directly to our camp," Morning Flower said pragmatically, as she quickly organized essential items within the teepee: weapons, water, food supplies, preparations Samuel recognized from 2 Hawks, teachings about emergency evacuation. "Then why would he bring soldiers here?" Samuel asked, helping her roll sleeping furs into tight bundles. "Trust that my husband has good reasons," she replied, though her normally calm voice carried an edge of concern. The approaching party was visible now, descending the pine-covered slope toward the valley floor. 6 riders in total with 2 hawks in the lead. Beside him rode a uniformed officer whose bearing and insignia marked him as ranking, possibly a captain or major. The 4 soldiers behind them maintained a respectful distance, their rifles secured rather than at the ready, a diplomatic approach rather than an aggressive one. The entire community gathered at the camp's edge to meet the visitors, Chief Running Fox and council members positioned at the forefront, with families arranged behind according to rank and relationship. Samuel and Emily stood with Morning Flower, watching the procession with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. As the riders drew closer, Samuel could make out more details. The officer appeared to be in his 40s, with a weathered face that suggested years of frontier service rather than Eastern military academies. His uniform, though official, showed signs of practical adaptation to Western conditions, a combination that Samuel had learned to recognize as indicating experience beyond formal training. 2 hawks dismounted first, greeting Running Fox with formal respect before turning to introduce the officer. The protocols of intertribal diplomacy were observed with careful precision, but an undercurrent of tension remained, centered on the unexpected military presence in the Sacred Valley. "This is Major Robert Hartwell," 2 hawks announced in English, loud enough for the gathered community to hear. "From Fort Windham. He seeks information about recent attacks on settlers, including the Whitewater Creek Massacre." Major Hartwell dismounted, removing his hat in a gesture of respect before addressing Chief Running Fox directly. "I thank you for receiving me in your territory," he began, his tone measured and formal. "My presence here today is unusual, but the circumstances demand direct communication." Running Fox studied the officer with the impassive dignity that characterized his leadership style. "What circumstances bring soldiers to our hidden valley?" he asked, 2 hawks translating his words into English. "A pattern of violence that serves none of our interests," Hartwell replied. "Attacks on both settlers and native hunting parties that have been blamed on various tribes, leading to retaliatory actions and growing hostility throughout the territory." This statement, when translated for the gathered Comanche, created a stir among the council members. Black Hawk, still the most vocal skeptic of any cooperation with white authorities, spoke sharply in Comanche. "He asks why we should believe you care about justice for native peoples," 2 hawks translated carefully. "Many promises have been broken before." Hartwell's expression remained steady. "A fair question. Some men in military and territorial government recognize that false blame leads to unnecessary conflict, which serves no one's interests except those profiting from chaos." He hesitated before adding, "I also have personal reasons. My brother's family was killed last year in an attack initially blamed on Kiowa raiders. Evidence later proved it was the work of white outlaws disguised in native dress." This personal connection shifted the energy in the gathering. Even Black Hawk's expression registered a grudging reassessment. "My investigation has led me to believe that many recent attacks, including the Whitewater Creek Massacre, are the work of the same group, the Carson Gang, led by William Carson and his lieutenant James Blackwell." At the mention of these names, Samuel felt his heart rate accelerate. The men responsible for his parents' deaths identified clearly for the first time. When Scout 2 Hawks informed me that survivors of the Whitewater attack had found sanctuary, here I realized the importance of speaking with them directly. Hartwell's gaze found Samuel and Emily in the crowd. Their testimony could be crucial to building a case against these men. Running Fox considered this information in silence before responding. Why would these men attack a wagon train of families? What value could there be in such cruelty? Hartwell reached into his saddlebag and produced an official-looking document. With a territorial seal, the wagon of Edward Blackwell contained surveyor's maps and reports documenting significant gold deposits in lands currently designated as Comanche hunting grounds. If those documents reached territorial officials, certain boundaries might have been redrawn to protect native claims. This revelation landed like a thunderbolt among the gathered Comanche. Running Fox and the elders exchanged significant glances as Two Hawks translated the implications. "So the massacre was not random," Samuel said, finding his voice at last. "They killed our parents, all those families, for access to gold." "Land and gold," Hartwell confirmed grimly. "The oldest motives in the territories. What makes this case unusual is the connection to territorial officials. Carson doesn't operate independently. He has protection from someone in power." Running Fox spoke at length in Comanche, his expression grave. Two Hawks translated carefully. "The chief asks how this affects the children who shelter with us. Are they in greater danger because of this knowledge, or does this news open a path back to their people?" Hartwell considered the question with evident care. "The children are the only living witnesses who can identify members of the gang and testify to their disguise as native attackers. That makes them both valuable and vulnerable." He looked directly at Samuel. "I can arrange protective custody and transport to Fort Gibson, where the territorial prosecutor would take their statement. From there, they could be escorted to relatives if they have any." The possibility of returning to civilization, to familiar language, customs, and surroundings, hit Samuel with unexpected force. For the first time in weeks, a concrete alternative to life among the Comanche presented itself, yet the thought brought as much anxiety as relief. "We have an uncle in St. Louis," he said quietly. "Our father's brother. We haven't met him, but he's our only remaining family." Running Fox absorbed this information before responding. "This decision cannot be rushed," he declared, Two Hawks translating his words. "The council will consider what has been said. The children who have lived among us must also listen to their own spirits. We will speak again tomorrow, after the morning council fire." With that pronouncement, the initial meeting concluded. As the participants dispersed, Samuel found himself walking alongside Major Hartwell, whose military bearing had softened slightly away from the formal gathering. "I must ask," Hartwell said quietly, falling into step with Samuel. "How have you and your sister fared here? Your circumstances are unprecedented." Samuel glanced at him, measuring his response. This man represented a bridge back to their former world. Yet Samuel felt suddenly protective of their experiences with the Comanche. "Two Hawks found us after the massacre," he said simply. "When it became clear that returning to settlements might be dangerous, he brought us here. His people took us in when we had nothing." He paused before adding, "Not all white communities would show the same compassion to strangers." Hartwell absorbed this with a thoughtful nod. "Indeed not. I've documented numerous instances of both cruelty and kindness on all sides of the frontier." His gaze swept over the camp, the orderly arrangement of teepees, children playing under watchful eyes, women working at evening meal preparations. "May I ask how your sister has adapted? She seems remarkably resilient for one so young." The question triggered a surge of protective instinct in Samuel. "Emily has found ways to belong here," he replied, watching his sister across the clearing, where she was already showing one of the younger Comanche children her basket-weaving technique. "These people have treated her with kindness, even those who were initially suspicious of us." Their conversation was interrupted by Little Fox, who approached with a message from Running Fox. The soldiers would be permitted to camp at the valley's edge, close enough for continued discussions, but separated enough to maintain the tribe's sense of security and autonomy. That evening, as the Comanche community shared an unusually subdued meal around their communal fires, Samuel noticed the subtle divisions that had formed in response to Major Hartwell's visit. Black Hawk and his supporters gathered at one fire, their gestures and expressions suggesting continued resistance to any cooperation with military authorities. The older council members, including Running Fox, maintained a position of measured consideration, neither embracing nor rejecting the possibility of alliance against the Carson gang. Two hawks joined Samuel and Emily at Morning Flower's fire, his face revealing the weariness of a man caught between worlds. "The mayor is a good man," he said quietly as they ate, "one of few in the army who sees beyond the usual prejudices, but his arrival has stirred the hornet's nest." "What will happen tomorrow?" Samuel asked, aware that Emily was listening intently. Despite pretending to focus on her food, Running Fox will seek consensus from the council, but the division runs deep. Two hawks glanced toward the distant fires, where Black Hawk's group continued their animated discussion. "Some believe any involvement with white authorities endangers the tribe." "And what do you believe?" Samuel pressed. Two hawks considered the question carefully. "I believe the Carson gang threatens both our peoples, and that sometimes unlikely alliances form when facing a common enemy." He studied Samuel with his penetrating gaze. "But the decision about your path forward belongs to you and your sister, not to me or the council." Later that night, as Emily slept soundly on her fur pallet, Samuel sat with Morning Flower outside the teepee. The autumn night was cool but clear. Stars scattered across the sky in patterns he had learned to recognize during their time with the Comanche. "You are troubled," Morning Flower observed, her keen perception missing nothing of Samuel's inner conflict. "I don't know what to do," he admitted, "for Emily, for both of us." He gestured toward the distant soldier camp, visible only by its small fire. "Major Hartwell offers a way back to our own people, maybe even to our uncle." His gaze shifted to the Comanche camp around them, "but this place has become a home." Morning Flower suggested gently when he couldn't find the words. "Not exactly home," Samuel clarified. "But not foreign anymore either." He touched his father's pocket watch, which still hung from the leather cord around his neck. "I promised to take care of Emily. I just don't know which path does that best." Morning Flower was silent for a moment, her face illuminated by the dying embers of their fire. "When I lost my son," she said finally, "I believed no child could ever replace him in my heart." Her gaze moved toward the teepee where Emily slept. "I was right about that. No child replaces another, but the heart can expand to hold new loves alongside the old ones." She placed her hand briefly on Samuel's shoulder. "You carry your parents here," she said, touching her own heart. "Their wisdom, their love, their hopes for you. Ask them what they would want for their children in this world that has changed around you." Samuel considered her words, finding wisdom in their simplicity. His parents had raised him to be responsible, to protect Emily, to seek education and opportunity. But they had also taught him to recognize kindness and to value character above position or privilege. "Sleep now," Morning Flower advised. "Dreams sometimes speak truths our waking minds cannot hear." As Samuel settled beside his sister in the warm confines of the teepee, the question echoed in his mind. Which world would offer them safety, purpose, and the chance to honor their parents' memory? The Comanche camp with its unfamiliar ways but demonstrated compassion, or the white settlements with their familiar customs but uncertain welcome for two orphaned children linked to a controversial massacre. Outside, the night deepened around the valley as Comanche and soldiers alike contemplated the uneasy alliance that circumstances had forced upon them. The Carson gang's shadow stretched across both communities, demanding a response neither had anticipated, but both now faced together. Tomorrow would bring decisions that would shape not only Samuel and Emily's future, but potentially the relationship between peoples whose paths had collided on the western frontier. As sleep finally claimed him, Samuel's last conscious thought was of his father's face, not as he had seen it last, in death, but laughing as he taught Samuel to shape hot iron in his blacksmith shop. "The right path rarely looks easy, son," he had often said, "but your heart knows it when you find it." Dawn painted the eastern sky in watercolor shades of pink and gold as Samuel stood at the edge of the Comanche camp, watching the mountains emerge from darkness. He had barely slept, his mind circling endlessly around the choice that lay before him and Emily. His sister slept peacefully back in Morning Flower's teepee, unaware of the weight pressing down on her brother's shoulders. The council fire would be lit soon. Running Fox and the tribal elders would expect an answer: remain with the people who had sheltered them through tragedy, or return to the world they had been born into. Samuel's gaze drifted toward the soldiers' camp, where Major Hartwell and his men were already stirring, preparing for the day's negotiations. The mountains speak more clearly than men, don't they? Samuel turned to find two hawks approaching, a steaming wooden cup in his hand. He offered it to the boy, the bitter morning tea the Comanche favored to ward off winter's chill. "I couldn't sleep," Samuel admitted, accepting the drink. Few did. Two hawks stood beside him, his gaze following Samuel's to the distant peaks, where the first sunlight gilded the snow-capped summits. Major Hartwell's news has stirred many thoughts. What will happen to your people if his investigation proves the Carson gang has been falsely blaming natives for the attacks? Two Hawks' expressions remained carefully neutral, though Samuel had learned to read the subtle tension around his eyes. It may prevent some retribution raids by the army, perhaps ease restrictions on our hunting territories. He glanced at Samuel. "But one investigation will not change the tide that flows against my people. And if Emily and I go with him, testify, your words might help bring justice for your parents and the others who died at Whitewater Creek." Two Hawks paused, choosing his next words with care. "But speaking this truth also exposes you to those who would prefer it remain buried." Before Samuel could respond, activity increased behind them as the council members emerged from their lodges, moving toward the central area where the morning fire was being prepared. The decision time had arrived. The council gathering proceeded with the formal dignity that characterized Comanche governance. Running Fox opened with a prayer to the Great Spirit, asking for wisdom and clear vision. The elders spoke in turn, weighing the benefits and risks of alliance with Major Hartwell, and expressing their various perspectives on the Cooper children's presence among them. Black Hawk, predictably, argued against further involvement with white authorities. "The children brought soldiers to our sacred valley," he said, Two Hawks translating his words for Samuel's benefit. "Next will come more soldiers, then settlers, then the reservation agents with their false promises." Others countered with more moderate views. White Bear, an elder whose son had been killed by the Carson gang during a buffalo hunt, spoke powerfully about the shared enemy threatening both their peoples. "The snake that bites the deer today will bite the buffalo tomorrow," he said, using a Comanche metaphor for dangers that spread unchecked. Throughout the discussion, Samuel watched the faces around the fire, recognizing the genuine care many had developed for him and Emily, while acknowledging the legitimate concerns others expressed about their future. When all council members had spoken, Running Fox turned to Major Hartwell, who had been invited to join the circle. "You have heard our words," the chief said through Two Hawks' translation. "Now speak your truth about what you offer these children." Hartwell straightened, addressing the council with respectful formality. "I propose to escort Samuel and Emily Cooper to Fort Gibson, where they will be under military protection while they provide testimony about the Whitewater Creek massacre. Once their statement is recorded and verified, they would be transported safely to their uncle in St. Louis, with funds provided for their education and care until adulthood." The major glanced at Samuel before continuing. I cannot promise that. Their testimony alone will bring Carson and his men to justice. But combined with other evidence we're gathering, it strengthens our case significantly." He paused. "More importantly, it gives these children a chance to reclaim their place in the world with a family of their own blood." Running Fox nodded thoughtfully before turning to Samuel. "And what do you wish, young one, who has lived between worlds? The council has shared wisdom, the soldier has made his offer, but the path must be chosen by those who will walk it." All eyes turned to Samuel, who suddenly felt the full weight of responsibility for both his and Emily's futures. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "When the Carson gang killed our parents," he began, his voice steadier than he expected, "they took away the future we were supposed to have, the peach orchard Emily wanted to plant, the blacksmith shop my father planned to open in California, the life we had traveled so far to build." Samuel touched his father's watch at his throat. "But they didn't take everything. We survived, and we found something we never expected. People who would take in strangers and treat them with kindness when they had nothing left." He looked at Two Hawks and Morning Flower, then at Running Fox and the other council members who had gradually accepted the Cooper children into their community. "I believe our parents would want us to help bring these men to justice, not just for our family, but for everyone they've harmed, Comanche and settlers alike." Samuel straightened his shoulders. "I want to go with Major Hartwell to tell what I saw that day, but I also want Emily to be safe, and I'm not sure the path to Fort Gibson is the safest one for her." Morning Flower spoke then, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had guided the children through their adjustment to Comanche life. "The little one has found strength here. Her spirit has begun to heal. To separate you now would wound you both anew." Running Fox considered this, then offered an unexpected solution. "Perhaps there is another path that honors both purposes." He turned to Major Hartwell. "If Two Hawks and I accompany the children to your fort, bringing our own testimony about Carson's attacks on our hunting parties, we create a stronger voice. Together, the children remain with those they trust while still speaking their truth." The proposal created a stir among both the Comanche Council and the soldiers. Two Hawks studied his chief with evident surprise. Running Fox had not left the valley in 3 winters, his advancing age and status generally keeping him at the center of tribal life rather than on diplomatic missions. "Such a journey carries risk," Two Hawks said carefully, "for all involved." "All important paths carry risk," Running Fox replied. "But this snake threatens both our peoples. Perhaps it is time to hunt it together." Major Hartwell appeared genuinely moved by the chief's proposal. "I would welcome such an arrangement," he said, "and guarantee safe passage for all who travel. Under my protection." Black Hawk rose abruptly, his face dark with disapproval. "This is folly," he declared. "To place our chief at risk for white man's justice, we will never see." Several younger warriors murmured agreement. "I have lived 64 winters," Running Fox responded calmly. "I have seen promises made and broken, blood spilled and peace declared, but I have never seen justice grow from seeds of separation." He gazed steadily at Black Hawk. "You may remain here with those who share your view, protecting our winter. Camp, Two Hawks and I will return before the deep snow comes." The authority in his voice effectively ended the immediate debate, though Samuel could see the division remained unresolved among the tribal members. When the council concluded, Running Fox announced their departure would occur the following dawn, allowing 1 day for preparation. The Cooper children would travel, with Two Hawks, Morning Flower, Running Fox, and 2 trusted warriors, escorted by Major Hartwell and his soldiers. The remaining tribe would continue preparations for winter under White Bear's temporary leadership. As the camp dispersed to begin preparations, Samuel found Emily near Morning Flower's teepee, helping to sort dried berries into traveling pouches. Her small face brightened when she saw him. "Are we going away?" she asked, clearly having gleaned the essential outcome from the activity around camp. Samuel knelt beside her. "For a little while. We're going to tell people about what happened to Mama and Papa, to help catch the bad men who did it." Emily's expression grew solemn. "Will we come back here after?" The innocent question caught Samuel off guard. He hadn't considered that Emily might have developed enough attachment to their Comanche sanctuary to want to return. "I don't know, Em. Major Hartwell says we have an uncle in St. Louis who could take care of us. Would Morning Flower come too?" Emily's priorities were clear in her question. No, she and Two Hawks would stay with their people. Samuel watched his sister's face process this information. "But we'd be with family, our real family." Emily looked toward Morning Flower, who was selecting traveling clothes for their journey, then back at Samuel. "They feel like a real family too," she said simply. The observation, delivered without judgment or demand, struck Samuel deeply. In the month they had spent with the Comanche, Morning Flower and Two Hawks had indeed become a kind of family too, and them, not replacing their parents, but filling an essential void with genuine care and guidance. "We don't have to decide everything today," Samuel assured her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "First, we help catch the bad men. Then, we figure out what comes next." Emily nodded, accepting this approach with the resilience that continued to amaze her brother. "I'll bring my special rocks," she declared, referring to the small collection of colorful stones she had gathered since arriving at the camp. Replacements for the pebble pouch lost during their escape from Whitewater Creek. "Good idea," Samuel agreed, grateful for her practical focus in the face of yet another disruption to their young lives. The remainder of the day passed in careful preparation. Two Hawks instructed Samuel in what to expect along the 4-day journey to Fort Gibson, while Morning Flower worked with Emily to prepare appropriate clothing for the colder weather they would encounter in the higher elevations. Major Hartwell joined them briefly in the afternoon, bringing maps to review the planned route with Two Hawks and Running Fox. Samuel listened carefully as they discussed alternative paths and potential hazards. "The most direct route takes us through Crawford Valley," Hartwell explained, tracing a line across the paper with his finger. "But that's known as Carson Gang territory. They've ambushed military patrols there before." Two Hawks studied the map. "The eastern path adds a day to our journey but offers better cover and more reliable water sources." Running Fox nodded agreement. "Safety matters more than speed. The children have endured enough danger." As evening approached, an unexpected ceremony developed. The tribe gathered around the central fire to share a feast and offer prayers for safe passage. Each council member presented Samuel and Emily with small tokens for their journey: a beautifully crafted knife from White Bear, a medicine pouch from Yellowbird, beaded moccasins from several of the women who had taught Emily their crafts. Even Black Hawk, despite his opposition to the journey, approached with a gift: an eagle feather for Samuel, symbolizing courage and clear vision. "May you see both the snake and the path away from its strike," he said simply, before returning to his place by the fire. The generosity overwhelmed Samuel, who had not expected such a formal acknowledgement of their departure. For the first time since the council's decision, doubt crept into his mind. Were they making the right choice, leaving this community that had embraced them so completely? Later that night, as final preparations were completed, Samuel found Two Hawks standing alone at the edge of camp, gazing at the stars. "Something troubles you," Two Hawks observed as Samuel approached. "I'm not sure we're doing the right thing," Samuel admitted, "leaving here, putting everyone at risk by testifying." Two Hawks considered this. "Do you believe your testimony will help bring Carson's men to justice?" "Major Hartwell seems to think so." "Then consider this, a Comanche teaching." Two Hawks gestured toward the night sky. "See those stars? We call that formation the Hunter. But your people name it differently. Both see the same stars, but with different eyes, different stories. Yet the stars themselves remain unchanged." Samuel studied the constellation, trying to understand the deeper meaning behind Two Hawks' words. "Truth is like those stars," Two Hawks continued. "You witness the truth at Whitewater Creek. It exists whether you speak it or not. But speaking it gives it power to create justice that might otherwise never come, even if it's dangerous, especially then." Two Hawks placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Courage is not acting without fear. It is acting despite it, because the path is right." The simple wisdom settled Samuel's tumultuous thoughts. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you've done for us." "You and Emily have brought gifts to our camp as well," Two Hawks replied. "You reminded many of our people that humanity exists beyond the boundaries of tribe or race. That lesson grows too rare in these difficult times." Dawn arrived with a thin frost covering the ground, the season's first ice cracking beneath their feet as the traveling party assembled at the camp's edge. 6 Comanche, including Running Fox and 2 Hawks, would accompany Samuel and Emily along, with Major Hartwell and 4 soldiers, a mixed company unprecedented in the territory's recent history. Morning Flower helped Emily mount a small pony that had been prepared especially for her, adjusting the blanket beneath her and securing the few possessions she carried in a parfleche attached to the saddle. Samuel would ride with 2 Hawks, while the others had their own mounts. "Remember what I taught you about the winter plants," Morning Flower instructed, her practical nature asserting itself even in farewell. "The red-berried bush with silver leaves stops coughing. The twisted root with 3 leaves helps stomach pain." Samuel recognized this final teaching for what it truly was, a way to impart lasting connection through shared knowledge, ensuring that a piece of Comanche wisdom would travel with them regardless of where their path ultimately led. As the remaining tribe gathered to witness their departure, Running Fox raised his hands in blessing, offering a prayer in Comanche that 2 Hawks translated softly for the children. "May the Great Spirit guide your feet on solid ground, your hearts toward true purpose, and your eyes to see both danger and opportunity. We journey now as one people, seeking justice for wounds that have touched both our worlds." With these words, the unlikely alliance began its journey eastward, leaving the security of the hidden valley for the uncertain wilderness beyond. Samuel glanced back once at the camp that had been their sanctuary, memorizing its appearance in the morning light, the circle of teepees, the central fire sending smoke spiraling toward the clear blue sky, the faces of those who had become, however, temporarily their community. Ahead stretched 4 days of travel through challenging terrain, followed by the even more daunting challenge of confronting territorial authorities with their account of the massacre. Samuel's hand found his father's watch, drawing strength from the connection to his past, while his eyes remained fixed on the trail ahead, where Emily rode beside Morning Flower, her auburn hair catching the morning sunlight as she pointed excitedly at a hawk circling overhead. Whatever came next, they would face it together, not alone as they had been that terrible night at Whitewater Creek, but surrounded by allies from 2 worlds, united in pursuit of a justice that might, with fortune and courage, begin to heal the wounds that divided. The frontier. The small procession wound its way through the foothills, ascending toward the mountain pass that would take them beyond Comanche territory and into the broader lands where the boundaries between peoples grew increasingly contested. With each step, Samuel felt both the weight of responsibility and the surprising lightness that came with purposeful action after weeks of uncertainty. They had survived. They had found an unexpected sanctuary. Now they would seek justice and, perhaps in that pursuit, discover where their true future lay. By midday of their second travel day, dark clouds gathered over the eastern mountains, promising the season's first significant snowfall. The temperature dropped steadily as their small procession wound through narrow valleys and across windswept plateaus, following game trails known primarily to the Comanche scouts. Samuel rode behind two hawks, his arms wrapped around the scouts, waist for balance as their horse navigated a particularly steep descent. Ahead, Emily traveled with Morning Flower, chattering excitedly about a family of deer they had spotted earlier that morning. Despite the gravity of their mission and the uncertain dangers ahead, Emily's resilience continued to amaze her brother. She possessed a remarkable ability to find joy in small moments, a skill Samuel had once shared but now struggled to recapture. "Storm comes soon," Two Hawks observed, glancing at the darkening horizon. "We should reach the Broken Pine shelter before nightfall." Major Hartwell, riding nearby, nodded agreement. "Your route has proven wise so far, Two Hawks. We've a good time despite the difficult terrain." The careful cooperation between the soldiers and Comanche had developed gradually over their first day of travel, initial wariness giving way to practical alliance as they faced the common challenges of the wilderness. Running Fox and Major Hartwell often rode together at the front of the column, their conversations spanning historical conflicts, current tensions, and occasional moments of unexpected common ground. "The Major is not what I expected," Samuel admitted to Two Hawks as they continued their descent toward a sheltered valley. "Few men are when you travel beside them rather than standing opposed," Two Hawks replied. "Hartwell has seen enough bloodshed to question the paths that lead to more." By late afternoon, the first snowflakes began to fall, fat, wet clumps that quickly increased in intensity. The temperature plummeted as the storm front swept across the mountains, transforming their journey from merely challenging to potentially dangerous. "There!" Two Hawks pointed toward a rocky outcropping ahead, partially visible through the thickening snowfall. Broken Pine Shelter. The natural formation proved to be a deep, cave-like overhang, large enough to accommodate their entire party and the horses. Ancient fire rings and scattered remnants of previous camps testified to its long history as a refuge for travelers caught in mountain storms. As the men worked to establish camp and secure the horses at the rear of the shelter, Morning Flower organized Emily and Samuel to gather the driest available kindling from beneath nearby pines. Together, they soon had 3 small fires burning at strategic points within the overhang, providing warmth and light as darkness fell prematurely under the storm's influence. "This snow comes earlier than expected," Running Fox observed as they huddled near the central fire, sharing a meal of dried buffalo meat and parched corn. "The mountain passing ahead may become difficult." "How long will the storm last?" Hartwell asked, his military planning evident in the question. Two Hawks studied the cave entrance, where snow now fell in a thick white curtain. "A night and day, perhaps longer. The clouds are heavy with winter's first message. We cannot risk the children in dangerous conditions," Morning Flower stated firmly, her arm encircling Emily, who had begun to doze against her side. Hartwell nodded agreement. "We'll remain here until the storm passes, then reassess our route. Safety takes precedence over speed." As the evening progressed and the storm intensified outside their shelter, the unlikely companions found themselves drawn into conversation that transcended their cultural differences. One of Hartwell's soldiers, a young corporal named Jenkins, produced a mouth harp and played a haunting melody that echoed pleasantly against the stone walls. In response, Red Feather, one of the Comanche warriors, shared a traditional song of thanks for shelter in difficult times. Samuel watched this unexpected exchange with fascination. Here, isolated from the broader conflicts that divided their peoples, these men found simple human connection through music, shared challenges, and the universal gratitude for safety amid nature's fury. Emily, now fully awake again, sat cross-legged, beside Morning Flower, sorting through her small collection of colored stones. "This one's for Two Hawks," she declared, holding up a smooth grey stone flecked with white. "It looks like eagle feathers." She proceeded to distribute her treasures among the group, a reddish stone for Running Fox, because chiefs wear red paint. Sometimes a blue-tinted quartz for Major Hartwell, because it's the color of soldier coats, and a perfectly round white pebble for Morning Flower, because it's special, like you. The simple, heartfelt gifts created a moment of surprising emotion among the hardened travelers. Even the most stoic warriors accepted Emily's offerings with solemn appreciation, recognizing the innocent generosity behind the gesture. When Emily reached Samuel, she pressed a golden-hued stone into his palm. "This one's like Papa's watch," she whispered, "so you don't have to be scared anymore." Samuel closed his fingers around the stone, throat tight with unexpected emotion. Emily had seen through his forced bravery to the fear beneath, fear not just of the Carson gang, but of the responsibility he carried for her future, for the decisions that would shape both their lives. As the group settled for sleep, the storm raging outside their sanctuary, Corporal Jenkins took the first watch position near the cave entrance. Samuel lay awake on his sleeping furs, his mind too active for rest despite his physical exhaustion. "Your thoughts travel far tonight," observed Running Fox, who had arranged his sleeping place nearby. Samuel turned toward the elderly chief, surprised by his perception. "I'm worried about what happens after we reach Fort Gibson," he admitted. "What if our testimony isn't enough? What if the Carson gang has friends among the authorities there too?" Running Fox considered this thoughtfully. The path of truth rarely runs straight to its destination. He shifted to face Samuel more directly. "In my first buffalo hunt as a young man, I tracked a great bull for 3 days, only to lose him at Buffalo Crossing River. I returned to camp defeated, believing I had failed. But 2 days later, that same bull appeared near our camp, weakened by a wound from another hunter. Sometimes what we pursue finds us in unexpected ways." "You think justice will find the Carson gang even if our plan fails?" "I think a man who spills innocent blood leaves tracks that cannot be hidden forever," Running Fox replied. "Your part is to speak the truth. How that truth finds its mark is beyond your control." The wisdom in these words gradually eased Samuel's anxious thoughts, allowing him to finally drift into dreamless sleep amid the protective circle of their unlikely alliance. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the snowfall had intensified, driven sideways by howling winds that scoured the mountainside. 2 Hawks and Hartwell stood at the shelter entrance, assessing conditions with identical expressions of concern. 3 hands of snow already, 2 Hawks reported when he returned to the fire. "Drifting deeper in the valleys, we cannot move today." Emily seemed delighted by the enforced delay, exploring the depths of the cavern with Corporal Jenkins, who had revealed a surprising talent for storytelling. He kept her entertained with tales of his childhood on a Pennsylvania farm, complete with animal sounds and exaggerated gestures that made Emily giggle despite the howling storm outside. Samuel helped Morning Flower organize their supplies, taking inventory of what they had consumed and what remained for the journey ahead. The unplanned delay would strain their provisions if it extended much longer. "We can stretch the food 2 more days," Morning Flower concluded practically. "After that, the men must hunt, storm, or no storm." By mid-afternoon, cabin fever had begun to affect even the most disciplined members of their party. Running Fox suggested a game the Comanche played during winter confinement, a complex competition involving bone dice and counting sticks that soon had everyone, including Major Hartwell, engaged in friendly wagers of small objects like buttons, cartridge casings, and Emily's ever-present colored stones. The shared activity bridged cultural divisions more effectively than any formal diplomacy might have achieved. Samuel watched in amazement as Hartwell's youngest soldier learned Comanche counting words, while Redfeather, experimented with English gambling terms, both men laughing at their respective pronunciation struggles. As evening approached again, with no sign of the storm abating, Two Hawks assembled a small scouting party to assess conditions on the sheltered side of the outcropping. He returned an hour later, snow-covered but with useful information. "The eastern face is more protected," he reported. "Snow accumulates less there. If conditions improve by morning, we might follow that route down to the valley." The group settled in for another night of confinement, making the best of their situation through shared stories and increasingly elaborate games. Samuel noticed that Emily had begun incorporating Comanche words into her speech, her adaptive nature allowing her to absorb language with remarkable ease. For his part, Samuel found himself drawn to Major Hartwell's accounts of frontier settlements, governmental policies, and the complex relationships between military outposts and neighboring tribes. "The truth many don't understand," Hartwell explained as they sat apart from the others, "is that most officers want peaceful relations with native peoples. Constant conflict serves no one's interests except those profiting from the chaos: gun runners, land speculators, and outlaws like the Carson gang." "Then why does the fighting continue?" Samuel asked. Hartwell sighed, his weathered face reflecting years of witnessing this fundamental disconnect. "Because fear is a powerful force, son. When a settler loses a family to a raid, they don't distinguish between tribes or circumstances. They fear all Indians. When natives lose hunting grounds to encroachment, they see all white men as threats. Fear breeds more fear until violence seems inevitable." "Like what happened to your brother's family?" Samuel ventured cautiously. "Exactly so." Hartwell's expression darkened. "The Carson gang attacked their homestead disguised as Kiowa. The army responded by punishing the nearest Kiowa camp, innocent people who had nothing to do with the attack. More hatred, more fear, exactly as Carson intended. That's why my testimony matters," Samuel realized, "because I saw them without disguises. I heard them speak English. Your testimony could help break a cycle that's been building for years." Hartwell confirmed, "Though I won't pretend it will be easy or without risk." Dawn of their third day brought the first break in the storm. Not a full clearing, but a noticeable reduction in wind and snowfall. After a brief council, the leaders decided to attempt the eastern route Two Hawks had scouted, hoping to descend to lower elevations where travel would be easier. The snow had transformed the landscape into an unrecognizable white wilderness. Familiar landmarks disappeared beneath drifts that in some places reached the height of a man's chest. The horses struggled through the deepest sections, requiring their riders to dismount and break trail ahead of them. By midday, they had made frustratingly little progress, covering perhaps 2 miles of territory that would normally have taken less than an hour to traverse. The physical demands took a particular toll on Running Fox, whose advanced age made the challenging conditions especially difficult. Though he said nothing, Samuel noticed the chief's labored breathing and the concern in Two Hawks' eyes as he frequently checked on his elder. They paused in the shelter of a pine grove, gathering strength for the difficult descent that lay ahead. The valley below remained their objective, a ribbon of darker landscape visible through occasional breaks in the clouds, where the snow accumulation would likely be less severe. "We should reach the valley floor by nightfall," Two Hawks predicted, though his tone carried less certainty than usual. "From there, the way to Medicine Springs is clear, with shelter and hot water to ease tired bodies." As they prepared to continue their journey, a distant sound carried through the crisp mountain air. The distinctive crack of a rifle shot, followed by another, then several more in rapid succession. The reaction was immediate and unified. Warriors and soldiers alike dropped to defensive positions, weapons drawn as they scanned the surrounding terrain. Two Hawks moved swiftly to position Samuel and Emily behind the shelter of a massive fallen pine, Morning Flower crouching protectively. Beside them, "Where?" Major Hartwell asked tersely, his military training evident in his efficient movements. Two hawks pointed toward a ridge approximately half a mile east of their position. "There, moving north to south." More shots rang out, confirming his assessment. Samuel strained to see through the trees, but could make out nothing beyond swirling snow and the dark outlines of distant pines. "Not aimed at us," Running Fox observed, his experienced ear differentiating the threat from distant conflict. "A fight elsewhere." Hartwell signaled his men to maintain defensive positions while he conferred with Two Hawks and Running Fox. "Carson's men?" he asked quietly. "Possible," Two Hawks acknowledged. "This territory lies between their usual routes, or it could be hunters, though few would risk the mountains in such weather." "Hunting parties don't exchange sustained gunfire," Hartwell countered grimly. "Someone's fighting out there." A strategic dilemma presented itself. Investigate the distant conflict, potentially exposing their party to danger, or bypass it entirely, possibly missing crucial information about Carson's activities. After brief deliberation, they opted for a compromise approach. "Two Hawks and I will scout ahead," Hartwell decided. "The rest of you continue toward the valley along our planned route, moving with extreme caution. We'll rejoin you before nightfall." Morning Flower objected immediately. "Separating weakens us all. The children's safety must come first, which is precisely why we need to know what we're facing," Hartwell countered. "If that's Carson's gang ahead, better to know now than to blunder into them with the children in tow." Two Hawks settled the matter with characteristic practicality. "I will go alone. My tracks will be harder to spot, and one man moves faster than two." He turned to Hartwell. "Lead them to Medicine Springs. I will find you there by moonrise." Despite Hartwell's protests, Two Hawks' logic prevailed. The scout departed immediately, melting into the snowy forest with remarkable speed, his buckskin clothing and practiced movements rendering him nearly invisible within moments. The remaining party continued their difficult journey down slope, moving with heightened vigilance. Samuel noticed the strategic repositioning. Soldiers now flanked their group on all sides, while Morning Flower kept Emily close, ready to shield her at the first sign of danger. Progress remained painstaking, each yard hard-won against the challenging conditions. By late afternoon, however, the snow depth had begun to decrease as they descended toward the valley floor. 2 miles farther on, they finally reached terrain where their horses could move more freely, the snow barely reaching their fetlocks. "Medicine Springs lies just beyond that ridge." Running Fox pointed toward a low hill crowned with distinctive red-barked trees. "We will camp there and await Two Hawks." The natural hot springs proved to be a series of steaming pools arranged in descending terraces along a protected hillside. The heat from the mineral-rich waters had melted the snow in a wide perimeter around each pool, creating a stark contrast to the winter landscape surrounding them. Hartwell and his men established a defensive perimeter while the Comanche warriors prepared camp with practiced efficiency. Having reached safer ground with ample natural resources, the tension that had gripped the party since hearing the distant gunfire gradually eased. Morning Flower guided Emily to one of the smaller pools, testing the water temperature carefully, before allowing the child to soak her feet in the steaming mineral bath. The simple pleasure of warmth after 2 days of bitter cold brought a smile to Emily's face that lifted everyone's spirits. Samuel helped gather firewood from the relatively dry area surrounding the springs, his thoughts continually returning to Two Hawks. The scout had been gone for hours, with no sign of return as darkness began to fall. While the others prepared the evening meal, Samuel found himself repeatedly scanning the ridgeline, watching for any movement that might indicate Two Hawks' approach. Major Hartwell joined him during one such vigil. "He'll return when he can," the officer said quietly. "Two Hawks is the most capable scout I've ever known." What if he found the Carson gang? Samuel asked, giving voice to his deepest fear. What if they captured him? Hartwell placed a reassuring hand on Samuel's shoulder. Then he'd find a way to warn us, even at cost to himself. That's the measure of the man. The Major's confidence provided little comfort as full darkness enveloped the camp. The promised moonrise came and went, with no sign of Two Hawks. Running, Fox maintained a stoic expression, but Samuel noticed the chief performing small rituals at the edge of camp, prayers for protection. Morning Flower had explained once, intended to guide lost travelers safely home. Midnight passed, and the camp settled into uneasy sleep, with doubled watches posted at all compass points. Samuel found sleep impossible, his mind conjuring increasingly dire scenarios to explain Two Hawks' absence. Shortly before dawn, exhaustion finally claimed him, dragging him into restless dreams where he ran through endless snowy forests, searching for something just beyond his reach. A hand on his shoulder jolted him awake. Samuel blinked in the grey pre-dawn light to find Morning Flower kneeling beside him, her expression uncharacteristically tense. "Come quickly," she whispered. "Two Hawks have returned. He brings news." Samuel scrambled to his feet, following her, to the edge of camp, where a small group had gathered around a fire. Two Hawks sat at its center, his buckskins torn and blood-stained, his face drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes alert as he provided his report to Running Fox and Major Hartwell. "Carson's men," he confirmed as Samuel approached. 12 riders, heavily armed, moving toward Fort Gibson by the southern route. "You're certain it was Carson?" Hartwell pressed, his military mind already calculating implications. Two Hawks nodded grimly. "I saw him, William Carson himself, with his Lieutenant Blackwell. They had prisoners, 2 men in chains." "Prisoners?" Fox's eyebrows rose in surprise. "What men?" "Army scouts, judging by their clothing. Being brought in as captives but treated roughly." This revelation created immediate concern among Hartwell's soldiers. "Carson turning in prisoners makes no sense," the Major said, shaking his head in confusion. Unless they're establishing an alibi." Samuel realized suddenly, the pieces falling into place. "Delivering prisoners to Fort Gibson makes them look like they're helping the army, not attacking settlers." Two Hawks nodded, impressed by the boy's insight. "They travel the southern route, which converges with ours near Eagle Pass. We will reach Fort Gibson perhaps one day before them, if we move quickly." The strategic implications were immediately apparent to everyone. Their small party would need to reach Fort Gibson, present their testimony, and convince the authorities of Carson's guilt before the gang leader arrived to establish his counter-narrative. "We break camp immediately," Hartwell decided, already rising to alert his men. "Every hour's advantage matters now." As the camp erupted into activity, Samuel helped gather their belongings, his heart racing with both fear and determination. The confrontation they had been journeying toward had suddenly become immediate and concrete. Within days, perhaps even hours after reaching Fort Gibson, they would face not just the challenge of being believed, but the direct threat of the very men who had murdered Samuel's family. The race to justice and continued survival had truly begun. Fort Gibson rose from the rolling Oklahoma landscape like an unlikely promise of civilization. The military outpost's wooden palisades and whitewashed buildings appeared first as mere shapes on the horizon, gradually taking form as Samuel's party approached from the north. Their arrival marked the end of a grueling 2-day push through difficult terrain, traveling from before dawn until well after dusk to maintain their critical advantage over Carson's approaching gang. Samuel rode beside Major Hartwell now, their pace quickening as the fort came clearly into view. The journey's final leg had tested everyone's endurance. Running Fox, despite his age and dignity, had borne the hardships without complaint, though Samuel had noticed Morning Flower administering herbal remedies to ease the chief's evident discomfort each evening. Emily, remarkably resilient throughout their arduous journey, had finally succumbed to exhaustion the previous night, falling asleep mid-sentence during their meager supper. "We've made good time," Hartwell observed, studying the position of the sun. "Mid-afternoon arrival gives us time to arrange matters before darkness falls." Samuel nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. Nightfall would bring additional security challenges if Carson's men arrived earlier than anticipated. The Major had pushed their party relentlessly, balancing the need for speed against the physical limitations of their company, particularly the children and running fox. Two hawks rode ahead as the fort's sentries spotted their approach. The scout raised Hartwell's identification flag, a captain's pennant, modified with specific markings to identify the Major's return. Even from a distance, Samuel could see increased activity along the walls as soldiers responded to their arrival. "Will they believe us?" Samuel asked, the question that had gnawed at him throughout their journey finally escaping his lips. Hartwell considered this carefully before responding. "Colonel Brannigan commands Fort Gibson. He's a fair man but cautious, skeptical of claims without substantial evidence." He glanced at Samuel. "Your testimony, combined with Two Hawks' tracking evidence and my own documentation of Carson's prior activities, creates a compelling case, but we must be prepared for scrutiny. And if Carson arrives while we're still presenting our case, then we face a more immediate challenge," Hartwell acknowledged, "but we've planned for that contingency." The Major didn't elaborate, but Samuel had overheard enough of the soldiers' discussions to understand that Hartwell had contingency plans in place, including the possibility of relocating the Cooper children to safety if the situation at Fort Gibson deteriorated. The fort's gates opened as they approached, revealing a rectangular parade ground surrounded by barracks, officers' quarters, and administrative buildings. A small, welcoming party awaited them, an officer whom Hartwell identified as Lieutenant Foster, accompanied by several soldiers who appeared surprised by the mixed company of Army personnel and Comanche travelers. "Major Hartwell," Foster saluted crisply, "we received no advance word of your return, sir, and certainly not with—" He hesitated, eyeing Running Fox and the Comanche warriors. "Such distinguished company. Our mission required discretion." "Lieutenant," Hartwell replied, dismounting and returning the salute, "I need to speak with Colonel Brannigan immediately regarding a matter of territorial security." Foster nodded, though his expression revealed lingering confusion. "The Colonel is in conference with Indian Agent Wilcox, sir. They're reviewing reports of increased tensions with the Creek settlements to the south." "This takes precedence," Hartwell insisted. "Please inform him that I've returned with survivors of the Whitewater Creek Massacre and Comanche witnesses who can identify the true perpetrators, who are currently approaching Fort Gibson with false prisoners." The lieutenant's eyes widened at this information. "Yes, sir, immediately." He turned to one of his men. "Jenkins, escort Major Hartwell's party to the visitors' quarters. Harrison, with me to the colonel's office." As the soldiers scrambled to comply, Two Hawks approached Samuel, speaking quietly. "We enter different worlds now," he observed. "The fort operates by rules and hierarchies, unlike our ways. Stay close to Morning Flower and Emily until matters clarify." Samuel nodded, understanding that the delicate alliance that had carried them safely through wilderness now faced new challenges within the structured military environment. He helped Emily down from her pony, noticing her wide-eyed fascination with the fort's bustling activity, soldiers drilling on the parade ground, supply wagons being unloaded, laundry flapping on lines strung between buildings. "It's so busy," she whispered, gripping Samuel's hand tightly. "And loud." After weeks in the relative quiet of the Comanche camp and the wilderness, the fort's normal operations did indeed seem chaotic and overwhelming. Samuel felt a protective urge to shield Emily from the curious stares of passing soldiers, many of whom had likely never seen white children in the company of Comanche leaders. They were escorted to a long, low building designated for official visitors, typically Indian agents, territorial representatives, or officers from other outposts. The accommodations were Spartan, but represented luxury compared to their recent wilderness camping. Actual beds with mattresses, a wood stove providing consistent heat, even a washstand with soap and towels. "The colonel will summon you when he's ready," Lieutenant Foster informed them. "In the meantime, I'll arrange for food and fresh water." As the lieutenant departed, the group instinctively reorganized itself, with Running Fox and the Comanche, warriors claiming one end of the long room, while Hartwell and his men established themselves near the door. Two Hawks, Morning Flower, and the Cooper children occupied the middle ground, a physical representation of their unique bridging position between cultures. Emily immediately gravitated toward the washstand, eyeing the soap with undisguised longing. "Can I wash my face and hands?" she asked Morning Flower, who smiled at the child's eagerness for such a simple comfort. "Of course, little one," she replied, helping Emily navigate the unfamiliar fixtures. Samuel watched this interaction with mixed emotions. Over their weeks together, Morning Flower had become a maternal figure for Emily in ways that transcended cultural differences. The inevitable separation looming in their future would be particularly difficult for his sister, who had formed deep attachments despite, or perhaps because of, the traumas she had endured. Major Hartwell approached as Samuel contemplated these concerns. "We'll be summoned to the colonel's office soon," he said quietly. "I believe you should be present, Samuel, as the primary witness. But Emily should remain here with Morning Flower." Samuel nodded agreement. "What should I expect? Colonel Brannigan will want your complete account in your own words. Tell him exactly what you saw at Whitewater Creek. No embellishment, no speculation, just what you witnessed directly." Hartwell's expression softened slightly. "Your testimony carries weight because of your age, Samuel. Children are generally considered reliable witnesses when recounting traumatic events they've experienced firsthand." Before Samuel could respond, the door opened to admit Lieutenant Foster, who appeared slightly breathless from his return journey across the fort. "Colonel Brannigan will see Major Hartwell, the Comanche chief, and the boy immediately," he announced. "The rest are to remain here under guard, for their protection," he added hastily, noting Two Hawk's sharp glance. Running Fox rose with dignified grace, though Samuel noticed the chief's slight wince as he straightened his aging frame. Two Hawks conferred briefly with his leader in Comanche before turning to Samuel. "Speak your truth clearly," he advised. "Remember what you have seen with your own eyes. This holds power that cannot be easily dismissed." With these words of encouragement, Samuel followed Major Hartwell and Running Fox across the parade ground toward the fort's headquarters, a two-story wooden structure distinguished by a small cupola and the American flag snapping in the brisk autumn wind. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down with each step, acutely aware that his testimony might determine not only Carson's fate, but potentially the future relationship between the Army and the Comanche people who had sheltered him. And Emily, Colonel Brannigan's office, occupied the building's second floor, a spacious room lined with maps and dominated by a massive oak desk. The colonel himself proved to be a compact, muscular man with iron-gray hair and penetrating blue eyes that missed nothing as the unusual delegation entered his domain. Beside him stood a taller, ascetic-looking man, whom Hartwell identified in whispered introduction as Indian Agent Wilcox. "Major Hartwell," Brannigan acknowledged with a curt nod. "Your sudden appearance with a Comanche chief and a civilian child requires immediate explanation." "Thank you for seeing us promptly, Colonel," Hartwell replied formally. "May I present Chief Running Fox of the Northern Comanche and Samuel Cooper, survivor of the Whitewater Creek Massacre." Brannigan's sharp gaze settled on Samuel, assessing him with professional detachment. "You were present at Whitewater Creek when the wagon train was attacked?" "Yes, sir," Samuel replied. forcing his voice to remain steady. My sister Emily and I were the only survivors. We were playing by the creek when it happened, and you witnessed the attack directly. Yes, sir, we saw everything from our hiding place. Brannigan leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. Major Hartwell tells me you can identify the attackers as the Carson gang, not hostile Indians as initially reported. That's a significant claim, young man. It's not a claim, sir. It's what I saw. Samuel met the colonel's gaze directly. The men who attacked our wagon train wore no disguises. They spoke English, and they called their leader Carson. Indian Agent Wilcox interjected, his tone skeptical. The boy could have been confused. Traumatized children often misremember details. I wasn't confused, Samuel interrupted, his voice stronger than he expected. I saw them clearly, heard them talking about what they'd found in Mr. Blackwell's wagon, the surveyor who traveled with us. They were looking for specific papers and got angry when they couldn't find them right away. This specific detail caught Brannigan's attention. Papers? What kind of papers? Major Hartwell produced a document from his satchel. Survey maps documenting gold deposits in territories currently designated as Comanche hunting grounds, sir. Carson was hired to intercept these before they reached territorial authorities who might have protected native claims. Hired by whom? Brannigan asked sharply. That remains unclear, sir, though we have indications of involvement from territorial officials or possibly mining interests. Hartwell placed another document on the desk. What is clear is that Carson's gang has been responsible for at least 7 massacres previously blamed on various tribes, creating artificial conflicts that serve specific economic interests. Running Fox, who had remained silent during this exchange, now spoke through Two Hawks' translation. The snake that bites in darkness brings poison to all lands. My people have lost hunters to these false voice men who speak with split tongues. The boy speaks the truth. We sheltered him and his sister after Two Hawks found them. Colonel Brannigan absorbed this information with a thoughtful frown. You understand, Chief Running Fox, that harboring survivors rather than notifying military authorities could be interpreted as interference. I understand that children without protection die quickly, Running Fox replied evenly. The army was not present when they needed shelter, food, and safety. Before Brannigan could respond to this pointed observation, Lieutenant Foster entered the office after a perfunctory knock. Sir, scouts report a party approaching from the south, approximately 12 riders, including what appear to be prisoners. Carson's men, Hartwell said grimly. As we anticipated, they're bringing in false prisoners to establish their credentials as allies rather than enemies. Brannigan rose from his desk, military decisiveness replacing his previous skepticism. How long until they reach the fort? 2 hours at most, sir. Then we have limited time. The colonel turned to Hartwell. Major, I want your full report immediately. Lieutenant, assemble Captain Reed's company for potential deployment. His gaze shifted to Samuel. Young man, I'll need your complete testimony documented before these riders arrive. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Samuel provided his account of the Whitewater Creek massacre to a military clerk who meticulously documented every detail. The number of attackers, physical descriptions, specific conversations Samuel had overheard, the methodical way the gang had searched each wagon before burning them. Meanwhile, Hartwell conferred with Brannigan and other officers, developing a strategy to manage Carson's arrival without revealing that contradictory testimony awaited him. Two Hawks and Running Fox contributed crucial details about Carson's previous attacks on Comanche hunting parties, establishing a pattern of violence that aligned perfectly with Samuel's account. As preparations continued, Samuel was escorted back to the visitors' quarters to check on Emily. He found his sister happily engaged in a game with Morning Flower, seemingly untroubled by the momentous events unfolding around them. "Is everything okay, Sam?" she asked, noting his serious expression. "Yes, He assured her, forcing a smile. The colonel is listening to our story. The soldiers are going to help catch the bad men. Emily considered this with solemn eyes that sometimes seemed far older than her 8 years. Will we go to Uncle Matthew in St. Louis after? The question caught Samuel off guard. They had rarely discussed their uncle, their father's brother whom they'd never met during their time with the Comanche. That Emily still remembered this possible future spoke to her resilience and adaptability. Maybe, Samuel answered honestly, but we don't need to decide everything today. His answer seemed to satisfy Emily, who returned to her game with morning flour. Samuel exchanged a glance with the Comanche woman, reading both understanding and sadness in her expression. She too recognized that their unlikely family unit would eventually face separation as the children's path led them back toward white society. Lieutenant Foster appeared at the doorway. "They're approaching the fort," he announced tensely. "Colonel Brannigan requests your presence, Mr. Cooper." Samuel squeezed Emily's hand reassuringly before following the lieutenant back to headquarters. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Soldiers moved with purposeful urgency around the parade ground, while sharpshooters had taken positions along the fort's walls. In Brannigan's office, a strategic council was underway. Maps spread across the desk showed the fort's layout and surrounding terrain, with markers indicating defensive positions and potential scenarios. "Carson clearly doesn't know we have witnesses to the Whitewater Creek massacre," Brannigan was saying. As Samuel entered, his arrival with army prisoners is a calculated move to establish his credentials as an ally against hostile Indians. "A cover he's maintained successfully for years," Hartwell added grimly, "until today." Brannigan turned to Samuel. "Young man, I've reviewed your testimony and compared it with our existing intelligence. The details align too precisely to be coincidence or confusion." His expression softened slightly. "I believe you saw exactly what you've described." Relief flooded through Samuel at this official acknowledgement. "What happens now, sir?" "We spring the trap," Brannigan replied. "Carson expects to be welcomed, and an ally. Instead, he'll face arrest, but only after we've separated him from his men to prevent bloodshed within the fort." The colonel outlined a precise plan, positioning soldiers strategically throughout the fort to isolate Carson's lieutenants from their leader once they entered. Samuel would remain hidden until Carson had been secured, then provide in-person identification to confirm the outlaw's identity. "Two Hawks and I will ensure the boy's safety," Running Fox stated firmly, making it clear this aspect was non-negotiable. Brannigan nodded agreement, respecting the Comanche chief's protective stance. Toward Samuel, "But remember, these men must face territorial justice through proper channels. We're making arrests, not executing vengeance." This pointed reminder seemed directed particularly at Two Hawks, whose personal grievance against Carson for his brother's death might have suggested alternative ideas of justice. The scout acknowledged the colonel's meaning with a slight nod, though his eyes remained hard as stone. From a second-floor window overlooking the parade ground, Samuel watched Carson's party approach the fort's main gate. Even at a distance, he could identify the gang leader, a tall man with a distinctive red beard, riding a large black horse at the front of the column. Beside him rode a shorter, stocky man, whom Samuel recognized as Blackwell, Carson's lieutenant, and the man who had nearly discovered their hiding place at Whitewater Creek. Trailing behind came the rest of the gang, surrounding two bound men in tattered uniforms who slumped forward in their saddles, apparently injured or exhausted. The entire tableau had been carefully arranged to present Carson as a heroic figure delivering captured enemies to military authorities. Colonel Brannigan took position at the fort entrance, flanked by Lieutenant Foster and two sergeants, a seemingly casual welcoming committee that disguised the dozens of armed soldiers positioned strategically throughout the parade ground and surrounding buildings. "Carson doesn't suspect anything," Two Hawks observed from beside Samuel. "He rides with the confidence of a man who believes his lies remain unchallenged." The fort gate swung open, admitting the outlaw party. Samuel's heart pounded as he watched Carson dismount and approach Colonel Brannigan with an exaggerated salute and boisterous greeting that carried clearly to their hidden observation post. "Colonel, William Carson reporting with 2 Comanche scouts we captured near Buffalo Ridge. They were mapping army positions, planning an attack, from what we gathered." Samuel couldn't hear Brannigan's response, but the colonel's body language conveyed appropriate gratitude and interest. He invited Carson and Blackwell to accompany him to headquarters to provide details while instructing Lieutenant Foster to secure the prisoners and see to the needs of Carson's men. This seemingly innocent division was the key to Brannigan's strategy. As Carson and Blackwell followed the colonel toward headquarters, separate groups of soldiers casually surrounded the remaining gang members, ostensibly to assist with horses and offer refreshments. "Now," Two Hawks murmured, guiding Samuel toward a side staircase that would allow them to reach Brannigan's office through a private entrance before Carson arrived at the main door. They slipped into a small antechamber adjacent to the colonel's office just as boots sounded on the main staircase. Through the partially open door, Samuel could hear Carson continuing his fabricated account. "Tracked those scouts for 3 days through the worst country imaginable. My men deserve commendation for their persistence in the face of the outlaws." Voice cut off abruptly as he entered Brannigan's office to find Major Hartwell and Running Fox waiting beside the colonel's desk. "What is this?" Carson demanded, his congenial tone instantly replaced by wary hostility. "This, Mr. Carson, is the end of your deception," Brannigan stated flatly. "We have witnesses to your attack on the Whitewater Creek wagon train. Witnesses who saw you and your men murder innocent families without disguise or pretense." Carson's face hardened, his hand drifting toward his sidearm until he noticed the soldiers flanking the doorway, rifles at ready position. Blackwell cursed under his breath, his eyes darting around the room seeking escape routes that didn't exist. "Preposterous," Carson blustered. "The Whitewater Massacre was clearly the work of renegade Comanche. There were no survivors to claim otherwise." At a nod from Brannigan, Two Hawks opened the antechamber door fully, revealing himself and Samuel to Carson's shocked gaze. "There were survivors," Samuel said, stepping forward with steady purpose. "My sister and I saw everything from the creek bank. We heard you order your men to search Mr. Blackwell's wagon for survey papers. We watched you murder our parents and everyone we knew." The blood drained from Carson's face as he stared at the boy he had believed dead. For a moment, the outlaw seemed genuinely speechless before recovering with desperate bravado. "The word of a child? That's your evidence, Colonel? Against my years of service to the territory?" "Your service has been documented quite thoroughly, Mr. Carson," Hartwell interjected coldly. 7 massacres attributed to various tribes, all coincidentally occurring near valuable resources or survey sites. Your employer's identity remains our only unanswered question." At the mention of an employer, Blackwell shot Carson a panicked glance that confirmed the accusation more effectively than any testimony could have done. "William Carson, James Blackwell," Brannigan announced formally. "You are under arrest for the murders at Whitewater Creek and numerous other crimes against the citizens and native peoples of this territory. Lieutenant, secure the prisoners." As soldiers moved forward to disarm and restrain the outlaws, Samuel felt a complex wave of emotions sweep through him. Relief, vindication, and a strange emptiness where his anger had burned for so long. Justice would come for his parents. Killers, but this moment couldn't restore what had been lost at Whitewater Creek. Two Hawks placed a steadying hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Your parents see this day," he said quietly. "Their spirits rest easier knowing truth has emerged from darkness." Outside, a commotion erupted as Carson's men realized the trap that had sprung around them. Shouts and the sound of brief scuffling carried from the parade ground, but Brannigan's preparations had been thorough. Within minutes, Lieutenant Foster reported that all members of the Carson gang had been disarmed and secured without bloodshed. "The false prisoners?" Brannigan inquired. "Not Comanche scouts at all, sir," Foster reported with evident disgust. "Local trappers forced to play a role under threat of death. They've confirmed Carson's intention to establish an alibi by appearing to assist the army." As Carson and Blackwell were led away to the fort's holding cells, Colonel Brannigan turned to Samuel with newfound respect in his eyes. "Your courage has accomplished what months of military investigation could not, young man. The territory owes you a debt of gratitude." Samuel shook his head slightly. "I just told the truth, sir, and I wouldn't be alive to tell it without the Comanche who took us in when we had nothing." Brannigan acknowledged this with a thoughtful nod, his gaze shifting to Running Fox and Two Hawks. "Perhaps there's a lesson here for all of us about assumptions and alliances." He straightened, military formality returning. "Arrangements will be made to transport you and your sister to your uncle in St. Louis, Mr. Cooper. In the meantime, you remain honored guests of Fort Gibson." The following days passed in a blur of activity. Samuel provided additional testimony as territorial authorities built their case against Carson and his gang. Evidence accumulated rapidly once the initial arrests broke the conspiracy of silence that had protected the outlaws. A territorial judge arrived to conduct preliminary hearings, and witnesses emerged from surrounding settlements with accounts of Carson's previous crimes. More significantly, the cooperative effort between Army, authorities and Comanche representatives created an unprecedented opportunity for dialogue. Colonel Brannigan hosted a formal council with Running Fox and neighboring tribal leaders, establishing new protocols for investigating cross-cultural conflicts before assigning blame or pursuing retribution. For Samuel and Emily, these larger political developments remained secondary to their personal journey. The question of their future, whether to accompany Morning Flower and Two Hawks back to the Comanche camp or travel to St. Louis to meet their uncle, loomed increasingly large as Carson's legal proceedings advanced. 1 week after their arrival, at Fort Gibson, a letter arrived from Matthew Cooper, their father's brother, expressing both shock at the tragedy and eager willingness to welcome his niece and nephew into his home. The letter described a comfortable house near a good school, mentioned Matthew's wife and their 3 children close in age to Samuel and Emily, and promised every advantage the growing city could provide. That evening, as Samuel sat with Emily, on the fort's western wall watching the sunset paint the Oklahoma plains in gold and crimson, he broached the difficult subject they had been avoiding. "Uncle Matthew's letter sounds nice," he began carefully. "His children would be our cousins. You'd have other girls to play with." Emily nodded, her legs swinging against the wall as she considered this. "Would there be a school?" "Yes, a real school with lots of books. You always wanted to learn to read better." She was quiet for a long moment before asking the question Samuel had anticipated. "Would Morning Flower and Two Hawks come visit us there?" Samuel's throat tightened. "No, Em. They would return to their people. St. Louis is very far from Comanche territory." "Oh." The simple syllable carried a world of understanding and sorrow. Emily leaned against her brother's side, watching the fading light transform the landscape. "I would miss them very much." "Me too," Samuel admitted. "But Papa would want us to go to school," Emily reasoned, her practical nature asserting itself, "and have a real house again." Samuel nodded, recognizing the wisdom in his sister's simple assessment. Their parents had valued education and family connections, undertaking their westward journey precisely to secure better opportunities for their children. The path to St. Louis aligned with those original hopes, albeit in tragically altered circumstances. The following morning, Samuel sought out Two Hawks and Morning Flower, finding them near the fort's stables where preparations were underway for their return journey to Comanche territory. Running Fox had concluded his diplomatic business with Colonel Brannigan and was eager to return to his people before winter fully claimed the mountain passes. "We've decided," Samuel announced without preamble. "Emily and I will go to St. Louis, to our uncle's family." Two Hawks nodded, unsurprised. It is the right path, though not an easy one. Morning Flower's expression revealed more emotion, though she quickly mastered it. The little one will thrive among her own kind, with other children and the learning she craves. "She'll miss you terribly," Samuel said, his voice catching. "We both will." "The heart remembers what eyes cannot see," Morning Flower replied, drawing Samuel into an unexpected embrace. "You will carry our teachings within you, wherever your path leads." Two Hawks watched this exchange with solemn eyes before producing a small package wrapped in soft deerskin. "For your journey," he said, offering it to Samuel, "and for remembrance." Inside, Samuel found an exquisitely crafted knife with a bone handle and leather sheath, a smaller version for Emily, and two medicine pouches on leather cords. Traditional Comanche protections for travelers. "These will serve you in your new life," Two Hawks explained. "Not just as tools, but as reminders that you once walked between worlds and found strength in both." The parting ceremony 2 days later brought together the unlikely alliance that had formed around the Cooper children's journey to justice. Colonel Brannigan and his officers stood alongside Running Fox and his warriors as the army wagon that would transport Samuel and Emily to the riverboat landing prepared to depart. Emily, who had maintained remarkable composure throughout the morning's preparations, finally broke down when saying goodbye to Morning Flower. The Comanche woman knelt to embrace the child, whispering private words of comfort and wisdom that brought a watery smile to Emily's tear-streaked face. "You will grow strong and wise," Morning Flower said, loud enough for others to hear as she placed a final kiss on Emily's forehead. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you will become." Two Hawks clasped forearms with Samuel in the warrior's greeting he had taught the boy during their journey. "Your father's courage lives in you," he said simply. "Remember that when challenges rise in your path." As the wagon pulled away from Fort Gibson, Samuel and Emily waved until their Comanche friends were no longer visible. The future stretching before them, St. Louis, their uncle's family, school, and eventually adulthood, seemed both promising and strangely distant compared to the intense experiences of recent months. Emily tucked herself against Samuel's side as the fort disappeared behind them. "We'll be okay, won't we, Sam?" she asked, fingering the medicine pouch Two Hawks had given her. Samuel touched his father's watch, still hanging beside his own medicine pouch on the leather cord around his neck. The timepiece represented his past, his parents, their dreams, the tragedy at Whitewater Creek. The Comanche gift represented the unexpected path that had saved them both, physically and spiritually. Together, they formed a complete circle. Loss and recovery, endings and beginnings, a journey through darkness into uncertain but hopeful light. "Yes, Em," he answered with newfound confidence. "We're going to be okay." The wagon continued eastward as autumn leaves drifted across their path, carried by the same wind that had once concealed two frightened children in a creek bed, beginning the extraordinary journey that had transformed victims into survivors, strangers into family, and ancient enemies into unlikely allies united in the pursuit of justice. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.